The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and furniture polish. I sat across from Diane Foster, my direct manager, watching her manicured fingers tap against the glass table. The projector hummed overhead, casting blue light across her face. Through the window behind her, I could see the parking lot below, rows of cars glinting in the afternoon sun. "Tina, we're restructuring the Q4 planning committee," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'm moving you off the deck." My stomach dropped. I'd been leading planning sessions for 3 years at Brightstar Technologies. Every quarterly forecast, every resource allocation model, every risk assessment matrix, I built them from scratch. The planning function had become synonymous with my name in the hallways. "Can I ask why?" She leaned back, crossing her arms. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You overprepare everything. Honestly, it's exhausting. The team needs someone who can move faster, be more agile. Someone who doesn't get bogged down in all the details." The words hung there like smoke, acrid and choking. I felt my face grow hot. My hands were flat on the table, perfectly still, but my pulse hammered in my throat. 3 years of 12-hour days, of catching errors no one else saw, of preventing disasters that never happened because I saw them coming. 3 years of being the person everyone relied on when the numbers needed to make sense. Overprepare. The word felt like an insult dressed up as professional feedback. Like she'd found the most diplomatic way to say I was inconvenient. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral. "I understand." "Good," Diane said, already looking at her laptop. "I'll send out the updated committee roster this afternoon." Walking back to my desk, I thought about the last planning cycle. I'd flagged a vendor payment issue that would have caused a cascading delay across 2 product lines. The payment system had a quirk where bulk contractor invoices sometimes got caught in an approval loop, and I'd noticed the pattern 3 weeks before it would have blown up our timeline. I'd spent an entire weekend mapping out the dependencies and creating a workaround. Diane had presented my solution to the executive team without mentioning my name. She'd gotten praise for her quick thinking and crisis management skills. That stung more than I wanted to admit. Old pattern and value denial. It wasn't new, this erasure. The pattern had been there all along, I just hadn't let myself see it clearly. 6 months earlier, I'd rebuilt the entire resource forecasting model after discovering it was double-counting contractor hours. The finance team had been making budget decisions based on phantom capacity for 8 months. Every allocation, every hiring decision, every project timeline had been built on numbers that were fundamentally wrong. I'd spent 3 weekends untangling the mess, cross-referencing timesheets with contract terms, rebuilding formulas cell by cell. Then I'd documented a new process so it wouldn't happen again, complete with validation checks and monthly audits. Diane told the division director it was a team effort. She'd used the phrase "we identified" at least 6 times in that meeting. Before that, I'd identified a security gap in our client data protocols. Not my job, technically, I worked in operations planning, not IT security. But I noticed the vulnerability during a routine audit review. Client information was being stored in shared folders that didn't have proper access controls. Anyone in operations could theoretically access sensitive data they had no business seeing. I spent 2 weeks coordinating with InfoSEC to patch it before anyone exploited it. Late nights, careful documentation, testing and retesting the new protocols. No announcement. No acknowledgement. Just a brief email from Diane, "Good catch." 2 words. That was the entire recognition for preventing what could have been a catastrophic data breach. And now, sitting at my desk with my planning committee access already revoked, I tried to open the shared folder and gotten a permissions error. I pulled up the current Q4 deck. Diane had assigned it to Trevor Callahan, a mid-level analyst who joined 6 months ago. Nice guy. Enthusiastic. Smart enough, but completely unaware of the hidden dependencies and seasonal patterns that made planning at Brightstar so complicated. He didn't know that our manufacturing contractors always underestimated delivery times in Q4 because of holiday staffing issues. He didn't know that the finance system had a reporting lag that made October numbers look artificially low until mid-November corrections came through. He didn't know that the product team habitually sandbagged their resource requests and then scrambled for more headcount 6 weeks into the quarter. All the unwritten rules, the institutional knowledge, the pattern recognition that came from years of watching the same cycles repeat, Trevor didn't have any of it. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane: moving forward, please loop Trevor in on any planning-related knowledge transfer. Thanks. Loop him in. As if 3 years of institutional knowledge could be transferred in a coffee chat and a few forwarded emails. I stared at my screen. The anger was there, hot and immediate, but underneath it was something colder. Hurt. The specific kind that comes from being told your best work is too much, that your diligence is a burden, that your competence is somehow a problem. I closed my laptop with a quiet click that felt final. Fine. Decision to withdraw extra labor. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down everything I did that wasn't technically in my job description. The list ran 2 pages, single-spaced. I monitored supplier reliability trends and flagged risks before they hit our timeline. I mentored 4 junior analysts who technically reported to other managers, but who came to me because their actual managers didn't have time. I maintained a shadow database of vendor performance because the official system was garbage, outdated, missing fields, no way to track quality metrics over time. I attended cross-functional meetings that had nothing to do with my projects because I'd learned that information shared in those rooms never made it to the people who needed it. I'd become a human conduit, translating between departments that spoke different corporate languages. I was the person everyone called when something didn't make sense. When the numbers were weird. When the timeline felt off. When someone needed to know if a decision would break something 6 weeks down the line. I was the person who stayed late to fix problems that would have exploded the next morning. Not because anyone asked me to. But because I couldn't stand watching preventable disasters unfold in slow motion. And according to Diane, I was doing too much. I looked at the list for a long time, my tea growing cold in the mug beside me. Then I drew a line through everything that wasn't explicitly part of my role. It was almost everything. The only things left were my assigned project deliverables and whatever meetings were mandatory for my pay grade. The rest? Not my problem anymore. The next morning, I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock instead of 8:15. I made coffee in the break room, taking my time. I checked my assigned projects, 2 process documentation updates and a capacity analysis that wasn't due for 3 weeks. I answered emails that directly concerned my work. When Trevor sent me a message asking about seasonal adjustment factors in the Q4 model, I replied, "That's outside my current scope. You might want to check with Diane for guidance." Polite. Professional. Bounded. It felt strange at first, like wearing shoes that didn't fit right. I kept catching myself about to jump in, to fix something, to answer a question that wasn't directed at me. The muscle memory of being helpful ran deep. But by mid-morning, I realized something: I had time. Actual time. Time to eat lunch away from my desk. Time to read industry articles I'd been bookmarking for months. Time to leave at 5:30 with all my assigned work complete. For the first time in months, I didn't take my laptop home. System stress test. The request started small, almost innocent. Day 2, an analyst from finance named Warren stopped by my desk. "Hey Tina, can you quick review this capacity model? I know you're not on planning anymore, but you always catch things nobody else sees." His smile was hopeful, expectant. This was how it usually went: someone would ask for quick help, and I'd spend 2 hours finding and fixing problems. I smiled back. "I'm focusing on my core projects right now. Maybe Trevor can help?" Warren's smile faltered. "Trevor's swamped. And honestly, you're better at this." "I appreciate that, but I really can't." He left looking confused, like I'd violated some unspoken contract. Day 3, a product manager named Sylvia practically ran to my desk, her laptop clutched against her chest. "Tina, thank God you're here. The vendor lead times in the system don't match what I'm seeing in the contracts. Can you figure out what's wrong?" That was my shadow database talking. The official system was still broken, and I'd been the one quietly correcting it in real time for 18 months. Every week, I'd manually update the vendor records with actual performance data so people could make informed decisions. "You'll need to escalate that through your manager," I said calmly. "It's a data integrity issue with the core systems." Her face fell. "But that'll take weeks to get IT's attention. I need this resolved by Friday." I shrugged gently, keeping my tone sympathetic. "I'm sure someone will prioritize it." She walked away slowly, looking back once like she expected me to change my mind. By day 4, my inbox was strangely quiet. The constant pings, the urgent requests, the quick questions that ate up hours, all gone. But the Slack channels I monitored, the ones where people scrambled to solve problems, were lighting up like a Christmas tree. Has anyone seen the backup supplier list for the Q4 materials? Why are the Q3 actuals showing contractor costs at 140% of budget? Is this a reporting error? Trevor, did Tina leave notes on the seasonal patterns? The model isn't matching historical trends. Who knows how to access the vendor quality database? The link in the wiki is broken. I watched the chaos unfold like weather on a distant coast. Clouds gathering, wind picking up, pressure dropping. It wasn't my storm anymore. That afternoon, Diane walked past my desk twice, both times glancing at my screen. I was working on a process documentation update, squarely within my job description, complete with timestamps showing steady progress. She didn't stop, but I could feel her attention like heat on the side of my face. By Friday, the planning deck meeting had been pushed back twice. I heard through the grapevine, Denise from Analytics, who still trusted me, that Trevor couldn't reconcile the resource projections with the finance team's headcount assumptions. He'd spent 3 days trying to find documentation that didn't exist because it had all lived in my head. The seasonal adjustment factors. The contractor utilization curves. The hidden dependencies between product launches and support team capacity. All gone. Or more accurately, still there, just not accessible to anyone but me. I felt a small, dark satisfaction. Not pride, exactly. More like vindication. Then I went home, made dinner, and didn't think about work at all weekend. Personal anchor scene. Saturday morning, I made pancakes. My partner, Sophie, sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone while I flipped blueberry batter on the griddle. Sunlight poured through the window, turning everything soft and gold. The kitchen smelled like butter and vanilla, warm and simple. "You're humming," she said, looking up with surprise in her eyes. I paused mid-flip. "I am? You haven't hummed in months." She set her phone down, giving me her full attention. "What happened?" I plated the pancakes and slid them across to her, the blueberries leaving little purple trails in the batter. "Nothing happened." "That's the point." She raised an eyebrow, forecovering. "Explain." "I left work at 5:30 every day this week," I said, pouring batter for my own pancakes. "I didn't check email after hours. I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat thinking about vendor timelines or resource allocation or what disaster I'd have to prevent tomorrow." Sophie cut into her pancakes, considering this. "How does that feel?" "Weird," I admitted, watching the batter bubble and set. "But good. I forgot what it was like to just be here. Present. Not half at work even when I'm home." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. The kind of quiet that comes from knowing someone so well that words aren't always necessary. Outside, I could hear neighbors laughing, a dog barking, the distant hum of Saturday morning traffic. Then Sophie reached across and squeezed my hand, her touch warm and grounding. "You've been half gone for a long time," she said quietly, her eyes serious. "I'm glad you're back." That hit me harder than I expected. I felt something crack open in my chest, a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I thought about all the dinners I'd eaten distracted, mechanically chewing while my brain churned through work problems. All the conversations I'd only half heard because part of me was still at Bright Star, solving problems that weren't technically mine to solve. All the moments I'd missed because I was too busy being indispensable. "I'm glad too," I said, my voice rougher than intended. Later, we walked to the farmer's market downtown. Sophie bought heirloom tomatoes and fresh bread from a vendor who knew her by name. I didn't check my phone once. We came home with bags of produce and spent the afternoon reading on the couch, her feet tucked under my legs, sunlight moving across the floor in slow rectangles. It was ordinary. Simple. The kind of Saturday that used to feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. It felt revolutionary. Escalation and dependence reveal. Monday morning, my phone rang before I'd even finished my coffee. Diane's name flashed on the screen. I watched it ring, steam rising from my mug, and let it go to voicemail. She called again 10 minutes later. Then sent an email with the subject line, "Urgent Q4 planning." The message was brief: "Need to discuss Q4 planning urgently. Please come see me." I waited an hour, finishing my coffee and responding to 2 emails about my documentation project. Then I walked to her office at a leisurely pace. She looked tired. Her usually immaculate desk was covered in printouts and sticky notes, paper scattered like leaves. The confident smirk from last week was gone, replaced by something tighter around her eyes and mouth. "Tina," she said, standing quickly. "Thanks for coming. We need your help with the planning deck." I stayed in the doorway, one hand on the frame. "I'm not on the planning committee anymore." "I know, but Trevor's struggling with some of the technical aspects. You have all that institutional knowledge, and we're running out of time." "You said I overprepared," I said evenly, keeping my tone neutral and professional. "I'm trying to be more agile. Less bogged down in details." Her jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near her temple. "This isn't the time for, look, we have an executive review in 3 days. The numbers aren't reconciling. Trevor can't find half the baseline data, and the finance team is threatening to escalate to Clayton if we don't get this sorted out." Clayton Walsh. The VP of Operations. 2 levels above Diane. "What baseline data?" I asked, genuinely curious about which specific problem had finally broken through. "The supplier reliability metrics. The seasonal adjustment factors. The contractor cost allocations." She gestured at the papers on her desk, a sweep of frustration. "All the stuff you use to track. Trevor keeps asking where the documentation is, and I don't know what to tell him." Used to. Past tense. As if I'd retired or died, rather than been deliberately removed. "That wasn't part of my official role," I said slowly, letting each word land. "I was doing it as extra support. Since you're restructuring for agility, I'm focusing on my core responsibilities." "Like you suggested." Diane stared at me. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely rattled. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk. "So you're just not going to help?" "I'm helping with everything in my job description," I said. "If you need additional support, you should probably discuss expanding my role. And my compensation. Through the proper channels." I left before she could respond, feeling her stare burning into my back all the way down the hallway. The rest of the day, I watched the panic spread like a virus through the office. Trevor sent me 4 messages, each more desperate than the last. The finance team escalated the contractor cost issue to their director. Someone discovered that the vendor backup list I'd been maintaining didn't actually exist in any official system. It was a spreadsheet on my desktop that I updated weekly based on my own research and relationship management. By Wednesday, Brightstar's executive team was asking questions. Why were the Q4 projections incomplete? Why couldn't anyone explain the resource allocation model? Where was the risk assessment that usually accompanied planning presentations? I kept my head down and worked on my documentation project, making steady, visible progress. When people walked by my desk, they could see I was busy, productive, completely absorbed in my assigned work. Thursday afternoon, I got a calendar invitation from someone I didn't report to, Clayton Walsh, Vice President of Operations. Meeting request for Friday morning, 10 o'clock. Subject line, Q4 planning discussion. No question mark. No, if you're available. Just a statement. I accepted without comment. Leverage meeting with higher authority. Clayton's office was on the 7th floor, executive territory, a place I'd only visited twice in 3 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, glass so clean it was almost invisible. The furniture was actual wood, not veneer, and the carpet was thick enough to muffle footsteps. Everything up here was designed to convey permanence and authority. He stood when I walked in, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Mid-50s, silver hair cut precisely, calm eyes that suggested he missed very little. I'd seen him in all-hands meetings but never spoken to him directly. "Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice steady and measured. "Thank you for making time." I sat, keeping my posture relaxed but attentive. "Of course." He settled back in his chair, hands folded on the desk. "I'll be direct. Our Q4 planning process is in shambles. The executive review yesterday was embarrassing. Diane couldn't answer basic questions about resource forecasting, and Trevor, nice kid, means well, is drowning. He spent 20 minutes trying to explain a capacity model he clearly doesn't understand. I said nothing, just listened. I did some digging, Clayton continued, his gaze steady on mine. Pulled the project records, talked to people on your team and adjacent teams. Turns out you've been the spine of our planning operation for 3 years. Not officially. Not in any org chart or job description. But functionally, you were the person holding it together. You were the one everyone relied on when they needed answers. He paused, watching me carefully. And then Diane took you off the committee because you were too thorough. Because you overprepared. The way he said it, flat, factual, with just a hint of incredulity, made it sound as absurd as it was. That's accurate, I said. It's also idiotic. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. I'm promoting you. Director of Strategic Planning. You'll report directly to me. Salary increase of 35%, full authority to rebuild the planning function however you see fit. You'll have budget for 2 additional senior hires, and you can restructure the team as needed. I kept my face neutral, but my heart was racing. 35%. Direct report to the VP. Full authority. Everything I'd been doing, suddenly official. Suddenly valued. That's generous, I said carefully, buying time to think. It's necessary, he corrected. We've been running on your invisible labor for years, Tina. That's on us, not you. We took advantage of your competence and your willingness to go above and beyond, and we didn't protect or compensate you properly. I want to fix that. But I need you to say yes. I thought about Diane's smirk. About Sophie's hand in mine at breakfast. About the list of things I'd been doing that no one valued until they disappeared. I'd like to think about it, I said. Clayton blinked, clearly surprised. You're not saying yes? I'm saying I need to think about it, I repeated, keeping my voice level. This is a big decision. It changes my entire trajectory here. I'd like the weekend to consider it properly. He studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his expression. You know, most people would jump at this immediately. I'm not most people. A small smile. No. You're not. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. I'll need an answer by Monday morning. 9 a.m. I stood. Thank you for the offer. Walking back to my desk, I felt something unfamiliar spreading through my chest, leverage. Real, tangible power. The kind that comes from knowing they need you more than you need them. It was intoxicating. It was also dangerous. Confront past gatekeeper. Diane caught me in the hallway Friday afternoon, just as I was heading out. Can we talk? She asked, her voice tight and controlled. My office. I followed her in, already knowing what this would be. She closed the door with deliberate care and turned to face me, arms crossed defensively. Clayton just told me you're being offered the director role. That's right. She took a breath, visibly steadying herself. Look, I know things have been tense. But we can fix this. I'm prepared to put you back on the planning committee. Full authority over your sections. And I can get you a merit increase, probably 10, maybe 15%. I have some pull with HR. I almost laughed. The absurdity of it, 1 week ago she was smirking about me over-preparing, and now she was offering table scraps to keep me under her control. You took me off the committee a week ago, I said flatly. I made a mistake, she said quickly, the words tumbling out like she'd rehearsed them. I underestimated how much you were handling. But we can move forward from here. You don't need to accept Clayton's offer. We can rebuild our working relationship. Start fresh. Why wouldn't I take his offer? Her expression hardened, the mask slipping. Because it'll make you a target. You'll be too visible up there. Executive roles at Bright Star are political, Tina. Intensely political. You're good at execution, excellent at analysis, but politics? Strategy? That's a different game entirely. You could get eaten alive. There it was. The real reason she'd kept me contained all this time. You kept me invisible on purpose, I said, the realization solidifying into certainty. You took credit for my work because that's how you stayed valuable. My analysis made you look smart. My crisis prevention made you look competent. And when I got too good at what I did, when people started noticing and asking questions, you pushed me aside before I could threaten your position. Diane's face flushed red. That's not, I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself, I interrupted, my voice calm and cold. You needed me doing the work, but you couldn't let me have the recognition. Because if people knew I was the one generating the insights and preventing the disasters, what exactly would your value be? She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. I'm not interested in your merit increase, I said. Or your committee seat. Or starting fresh. I'm done making you look good while you make me invisible. I walked out, leaving her standing there in her office, surrounded by the papers and printouts of problems she couldn't solve without me. The hallway felt brighter somehow. Deliberation with confidant. That evening, I called my best friend, Isaac. He picked up on the second ring, music playing in the background. Tell me you've been fired, he said cheerfully. Because that's the only reason you call on a Friday night anymore. I got offered a promotion. Silence. The music cut off abruptly. Then, wait, seriously? You're not kidding? I filled him in, Diane's dismissal, the planning disaster, Clayton's offer, the confrontation. Isaac listened without interrupting, which meant he was actually thinking hard about something. So what's the hesitation, he asked when I finished. Sounds like a clear win. They're basically handing you everything you've been doing anyway, just with proper recognition and pay. I stared out my apartment window at the city lights. Is it, though? Diane said executive roles are political. What if she's right? What if I'm just walking into a different kind of trap? What if I'm not ready for that level of visibility? Tina. Isaac's voice was patient in that particular way that meant he was about to say something I needed to hear. Let me ask you something. Do you think you're not ready, or do you think you're not allowed to be ready? The question landed like a stone in still water. Because here's what I'm hearing, he continued. You've spent 3 years doing director-level work without director-level pay or authority. You've been preventing disasters, building systems, mentoring people, holding the entire planning function together with your bare hands. This isn't about whether you can handle the job. You already are handling the job. You've been handling it for years. But the question isn't whether you're ready, he said firmly. The question is whether you're willing to stop letting people like Diane control what you're worth. Whether you're willing to step out of the shadows and actually get credit for what you do. That landed hard. I felt it in my chest, that familiar fear of being too much, too visible, too ambitious. You're not trying to get revenge, Isaac continued, his voice softening. You're trying to get free. Taking that role, on your terms, that's freedom. Staying where you are, making yourself small so Diane feels safe? That's just a different cage. Same prison, different bars. I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just never listen because you're too busy solving everyone else's problems. I laughed despite myself. Fair point. Take the job, Tina. Take it and build something better. You know the system's broken. Now you'll have the power to actually fix it. After we hung up, I sat with it. The fear was real, visibility meant vulnerability, meant people watching and judging and waiting for you to fail. But staying invisible had cost me 3 years of credit, of growth, of being present in my own life. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to bet on myself. Conditional acceptance. Monday morning, I went back to Clayton's office at 9 sharp. He looked up from his computer, reading glasses perched on his nose. Ms. Jackson. Please, sit. I sat, but I didn't wait for him to speak. I'll take the role. On 3 conditions. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he gestured for me to continue. First, I need full autonomy over the planning function. That means I build the team, I set the processes, I determine the methodology, and I report directly to you, not through Diane or anyone else who might try to limit my scope or filter my communications. Clayton nodded slowly. Agreed. Second, I want to bring in 2 senior analysts who've been doing exceptional work without recognition. Denise Huang and Rahul Patel. They'll report to me, and they get title promotions to senior planning analyst and appropriate compensation increases. At least 20% each. Send me their names and current comp by end of day. I'll make it happen. Third, I said, leaning forward slightly, I need a clear understanding that this role includes authority to implement structural changes. If I find broken systems, I fix them. If I find people who aren't performing or who are actively obstructing good work, I address it. If that creates political discomfort or upsets the status quo, you back me. Publicly. Clayton leaned back in his chair, considering. The silence stretched out, but I didn't rush to fill it. This was the crucial piece, the protection I'd need to actually do the job. You're asking for a lot of rope, he said finally. I'm asking for the tools to do the job you're hiring me to do, I corrected. If you want planning to actually work, to be a strategic function instead of a crisis management circus, it needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. That's going to upset people who've been coasting on dysfunction. People who've been hiding their incompetence behind systemic chaos. He smiled then, a real one, not the corporate version. You know what? Fine. You've got your conditions. All three. Start date is next Monday. You'll spend this week transitioning your current projects and having conversations with Denise and Rahul. I'll have HR draw up the paperwork today. We shook hands. His grip was firm, certain. Walking out, I felt the weight of it. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a decision to stop minimizing myself, to accept responsibility I'd been ready for long before I admitted it. It was terrifying. It was exactly right. As Director of Strategic Planning, the first thing I did was make everything visible. I built a shared planning dashboard, placed prominently on the internet, tracking assumptions, data sources, and decision points. No more knowledge trapped in someone's head. No more shadow spreadsheets. No more Tina knows standing in for process. I documented relentlessly, contractor cost patterns, supplier reliability metrics, forecasting quirks that skewed models if you didn't account for them. Everything that used to live in margins and memory was now explicit. I promoted Denise and Rahul as promised. Their ownership was clear, their names attached to every deliverable. When we rebuilt the Q4 forecast in 2 weeks, they presented it. They answered questions. They got the credit. We standardized the planning cycle. Integrated finance and operations. Built escalation paths, validation checks, automated alerts. The system no longer depended on heroics, it depended on structure. Metrics improved. Deadlines held. Crises became rare. 3 months in, I passed Diane in the hallway. Just a nod. She'd been moved sideways, busy but contained. I felt no satisfaction. The obstacle was gone. That was enough. A week later, in a board-level planning session, I flagged an unrealistic launch timeline. I showed the data, the trade-offs, the alternative. The room listened. 3-week delay, Clayton said. Tina, adjust the plan. My analysis. My decision. In a room that finally paid attention.